Crowd getting on its feet. 5 seconds. Anthony fires the three. Bang! Carmelo Anthony ties the game with 2.3 remaining.
The house kicked off by Pierce. Ray Allen for the game. Got it at the buzzer.
5.2 seconds left. Michael Jordan running on fumes with 45
up
points.
With a new indoor game in order to keep his students active. Even something as simple as a coin flip had implications that are still felt today. So without further ado, let's go through some crazy chain reactions.
I was gonna say,
and
I hope it's
a whole
not
bunch
some,
of what
some
could have
weird
been.
stuff. I hope it's kind of
2003
funny.
NBA draft,
Not funny, but like
one of the
unique.
most stacked drafts of all time, full of superstars, as well as several solid role players. There were so many options to pick from, but at the end of the day, everyone really wanted to get their hands on LeBron. The first 10 picks that were revealed at the draft lottery pretty much went as predicted. So when it got down to the final 3 teams to be revealed, it was pretty intense and nerve-wracking.
The third pick goes to the Denver Nuggets.
With the Nuggets landing the 3rd overall selection, that meant that the Cavs and Grizzlies were the only teams left for a chance to draft LeBron. But for Memphis, there was one problem. You see, back in 1997, the Vancouver Grizzlies made a trade with the Detroit Pistons, and in that trade, the Grizzlies received Otis Thorpe, while the Pistons got back a future first-round pick. So fast forwarding to 2003, wherever Memphis landed in this draft lottery, it would actually belong to the Pistons, unless the Grizzlies got the number 1 overall pick. That was the only way they would get to keep their pick. So you know, first-year president Jerry West was stressing out. Let's go ahead and watch how things went down.
The second pick
This nigga
goes to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Jerry West's face says it all. He knew right then and there that not only would he not be getting LeBron, but they also got pushed out of the top 10 altogether, just like that, because that second pick belonged to Detroit now. That must have been heartbreaking. I know that 1997 trade basically ended up costing them Carmelo and D-Wade, but at the same time, it was almost like a tease being that close to getting the number 1 spot. And what's crazy is that Memphis actually won 50 games the next season and managed to make the playoffs. So if LeBron ended up going to the Grizzlies, that obviously would have been a great addition to their already solid roster. We already talk about how Melo could have been a champion as a rookie if the Pistons drafted him. Well, if things went a little differently, you could certainly say the same thing for LeBron on the Grizzlies, as he wouldn't have had to carry the team to the same degree as he did with the Cavs. The basketball world was only one ping pong ball away from being sent in a completely different trajectory. Moving on to one that was more in Jerry West's control, in the 2014 offseason, the Golden State Warriors came off of a hard-fought 7-game series in which they lost to the Clippers in the first round, which resulted in the firing of Coach Mark Jackson, as they felt they needed to make some changes in order to take the next step. And another move that they were considering was trading Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. The Warriors were understandably hesitant at first, but they knew they had to make somewhat of a sacrifice if they wanted to reach their ultimate goal. I mean, at the time, Kevin Love did just come off of an incredible individual season, so they definitely would be getting something back in return. And the trade was basically complete. It was pretty much a done deal until Jerry West, who was a consultant for that Golden State team, stepped in and put the trade to a stop, because he said he still really believed in Klay and had a feeling that he would become a special player. So what did Jerry ultimately do that ended up convincing Golden State to not go through with the deal? He threatened to quit his job if they didn't listen to him. As you know, Thompson would remain a Warrior, and obviously that was the best thing that could have happened. All thanks to Jerry West having a sudden change of heart. So really quickly, what
So
if the
slept
Warriors
on.
gave away Thompson in 2014?
That's what I wanted to see.
Well, first of all, we wouldn't have witnessed his legendary Game 6 performance in the 2016 Western Conference Finals, which would mean OKC would have made the finals that year. And more importantly,
Yes,
Kevin
sir.
Durant more than likely
They
would
would've won
not
a
have
ring.
joined the Warriors, as he instead
See, I
probably
wanna
would
see
have
this.
stayed with the Thunder, enjoying his success there.
Yes,
Also,
sir.
Clay was the one who
Yes,
inadvertently
sir.
broke Kyrie's kneecap. So if he was traded to the Timberwolves in 2014, we wouldn't have seen any of these things go down. Just something to think about. We've all heard the story before.
See, I like
Len
that.
Bias tragically passing away just 2 days after being selected second overall by the Boston
Wasn't it?
Celtics in the 1986 NBA draft. He was a very explosive athlete who drew many comparisons to Michael
crazy.
Jordan. He was considered to be the most complete player at his position and certainly had a bright future coming his way.
We all
But
know this now,
unfortunately,
but
he was gone before he could
the
ever step
comparison to
foot on
Michael
the
Jordan
court.
thing
Of
is
course,
kinda,
that was a huge blow to the Celtics organization and had no other choice but to move on. So the
Did it?
following year, in the very next
Isn't he the
draft,
one who,
they
like,
took
overdosed?
Reggie Lewis
He
in the
overdosed?
first round, which turned out to be a great decision because by his second season, he would average 18 points per game for Boston. He looked like he was on his way to being a big part of their future, especially since Larry Bird was battling with injuries.
That's my
Lewis
dog.
eventually blossomed
That's
into
my
an all-star
dog.
caliber player,
best
elevating
small
into
forward ever.
averaging 20 points per game early in his career. But in 1993, bad luck would strike again for the Celtics organization. During a playoff game against the Charlotte Hornets, Reggie Lewis suddenly collapsed to the ground, lying there for several moments. Eventually, he did manage to get back up and tried to continue playing, but he couldn't fully catch his breath, so he was forced to call it a night. But little did he know, that would be his final game. The next day, a doctor informed him that he might have an irregular heartbeat, so he better do what he can to take care of that. But another doctor said that it wasn't all that serious, so of course, Lewis listened to the second doctor and continued to work out to get ready for the next season. But during an off-season practice, he once again fell to the ground out of nowhere, and unfortunately did not get back up this time. He was just 27 years old. So the question is, what if Len Bias and
I
Reggie
remember
Lewis
this.
never
Like, I've
tragically
seen
passed
this.
away so unexpectedly? Would the Celtics have stayed competitive well into the 90s, meaning that they probably would have been too
crazy.
good to draft Paul Pierce in 1998? Also
That's
meaning that the
crazy.
Big
Where'd Paul
Three
Pierce go?
would have never existed, causing LeBron to actually stay in Cleveland instead of joining Miami? All I'm saying is, even if just one of them stayed alive, the dominoes
Bitch
might
ass
have
LeBron
fell
didn't
in a
leave.
different direction. Even though Bias and Lewis passed away 7 years apart from each other, what are the
Rest in peace.
chances that the Celtics selected players in back-to-back drafts who ultimately left us too soon? Absolutely scary. Next, we have a
That's
story
crazy.
so
Yeah, that's
bizarre,
crazy.
it's almost like it was meant to happen. It was February 2008,
someone-
just about 2 years removed from the Heat's 06 championship. Things were not going too well in Miami.
Sir.
Shaq's career was on the decline as injuries were beginning to catch
Been on
up
the
to
decline,
him.
though.
One day, the team was
been on the
getting ready to
decline.
start practice when Jason Williams arrived only 10 seconds late, but Pat Riley didn't care if he barely made it. It was
Yeah, Pat
still
Riley
10
don't play.
seconds too long. So Riley
My
yelled
dog's
at him
folks.
saying, "Get the hell out of here." Then Shaq stepped in and said, "We're a team, we have to stick together." So Pat Riley responded by saying, "If you don't
Look
like
at
it,
Shaq.
you can go too." That caused Shaq to say, "Why don't you make me?" as he then got up in Riley's face. Udonis Haslem and Alonzo Mourning had to come to the rescue and hold Shaq back. It got pretty nasty. Pat
What?
Riley had enough with Shaq,
What?
so he did not hesitate to immediately trade Shaq to the Phoenix Suns, since the trade deadline was
Oh, yeah,
approaching
it was-
anyway.
it was
The Heat would
over
receive
from there.
Sean Marion and Marcus Banks in return. A year later, Miami was in desperate
Okay.
need of a third big man to go
don't
along
remember
with
Sean
Joel
Marion
Anthony
in
and Mark
Miami.
Blount. because Shaq and Mourning were no longer there. So during the 2009 trade deadline, the Heat traded Marion and Banks to the Raptors in exchange for Jermaine O'Neal and Jamario Moon. Moon would later sign with the Cavs that offseason, as Miami no longer needed him. So fast forward to 2011, the LA Clippers felt that they needed to move on from their aging point guard Baron Davis, so they traded him along with a first-round pick to the Cavaliers in exchange for Mo Williams and Jamario Moon. Then came along the draft lottery a couple months later. The Cavs had a 19.9% chance of getting the #1 pick with their own odds, while the Clippers pick, which the Cavs received from the Baron Davis trade, only had a 2.7% chance of winning the lottery. But somehow, the Clippers' first-round pick that actually belonged to Cleveland now landed the #1 overall pick of the upcoming draft, which we all know turned out to be Kyrie Irving. And it's just another example of the Clippers' curse. So Cavs fans should be forever thankful that J. Will did not show up to practice on time, because otherwise, LeBron probably wouldn't have gone back to Cleveland if Kyrie wasn't there. And we wouldn't have had the privilege of watching that epic 2016 NBA Finals.
They be all on,
a seemingly
what's his name?
unrelated event led
they be
to
all
Kyrie.
on Kevin Love's ass. Yeah, there's going to be a part 2. So we're gonna watch that one when that one drops. But yeah, they be all on Kevin Love's ass, like, oh, he sucks. Like, what do you mean? LeBron literally wasn't coming back to Cleveland if Kevin Love didn't come. Pause. But yeah, they're like, get Kevin Love there, I'm not coming back. I was like, they're like, okay, we got you. What I've always wondered is, not even just because it's this video, but like, we know what Wiggins is now, right? And I always tell people this is, it's because it's a system. But like, rookie year Wiggins, sophomore year Wiggins, third year Wiggins was smooth. But what if he stayed in Cleveland? And I don't mean he just stayed there by himself. Like, he got to stay there with Kyrie and Braun. Like, what would he have blossomed into just being around them? But we'll never know. But that's gonna do it, y'all. We will be watching part 2 whenever part 2 comes. I hope it gets crazier. The craziest one I saw was probably the Lynn Bias one. But yeah, that's gonna do it. It's been your boy, and
yeah, they can't hold us back. We on another level. Yeah, it's that new age, ain't it something special? Yeah, we gon' change the game. We gon' live forever. Yeah, it's that new age. It's that new age. This is the new age. Now they wanna play cause they tryna get paid, but they can't cause they're too late.